Lee sat in front of his small television, eyes glued to the screen as a motivational speaker shouted about the importance of hard work and determination. The speaker's words were like a spark to dry kindling, igniting a fire within Lee that he couldn't ignore. He felt a surge of energy and excitement as he thought about applying the principles of hustle culture to his farm. For generations, Lee's family had tended the land with care and patience, but Lee saw their traditional methods as old-fashioned and inefficient. He was convinced that with enough hard work, he could achieve prosperity beyond his wildest dreams. He spent hours watching videos and reading books on how to optimize crop growth, convinced that he could outsmart nature and reap the rewards. As he walked through his fields, Lee's enthusiasm and determination were palpable. He envisioned rows of lush green crops stretching as far as the eye could see, and his mind racing with the possibilities. But despite his passion, Lee lacked a deep understanding of the natural world and the delicate balance of his ecosystem. He saw the land as something to be conquered, rather than worked with. "I can do this," Lee said to himself, his voice filled with conviction. "I just need to work harder and smarter. I can make this land produce more than it ever has before." As he spoke, Lee's eyes fell upon a small, struggling plant. He reached down and grasped the stem, pulling it upwards in an attempt to help it grow. The plant's roots were weak, and it wobbled precariously in the wind. Lee didn't notice, too caught up in his own vision of success. "I'll show you," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I'll show you all what I can do." But as he stood there, the wind began to pick up, and the plant's leaves started to wilt. Lee didn't notice, too caught up in his own ambition. He was blind to the subtle signs of nature and the delicate balance of his ecosystem. "I'll make this work," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "I just need to try harder." But as the sun began to set, Lee's enthusiasm began to wane. He looked out at his fields and saw the same struggling plants, the same dry earth. He felt a pang of doubt, but pushed it aside. "I just need to work harder," he said, his voice filled with determination. But as he walked back to his small farmhouse, Lee couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something, that there was more to farming than just hard work and determination. He didn't know what it was, but he was determined to find out. Lee's days blended together in a blur of sweat and toil as he worked tirelessly to coax his crops into growth. He tugged at the plants, trying to stretch them upwards, and overwatered them, hoping to quench their thirst. But despite his best efforts, the crops began to weaken and droop. The once lush green leaves turned yellow and wilted, and the stems grew brittle and weak. Lee's frustration grew with each passing day. He couldn't understand why his crops weren't responding to his care. He had done everything the books and videos had told him to do, and yet his crops were failing. He felt a sense of desperation creeping in, and his ego began to take over. He was convinced that he just needed to try harder, to push the plants to grow faster and stronger. "I know I can do this," Lee muttered to himself, his voice laced with determination. "I just need to. Yes! I need to give them more water." He grabbed the hose and began to douse the plants with water, soaking the soil and drowning the roots. But instead of reviving the crops, the water only seemed to make them weaker. The plants began to rot and wilt, their leaves turning a sickly shade of brown. Lee's eyes widened in horror as he surveyed the damage. He had never seen his crops look so bad. He felt a pang of doubt, but his ego refused to let him admit defeat. He convinced himself that he just needed to try a different approach, to find a new way to force the plants to grow. "I'll just need to... yes! I'll just need to give them more fertilizer," Lee exclaimed, his voice filled with conviction. He rushed to the shed and grabbed a bag of fertilizer, scattering it liberally over the soil. But instead of nourishing the plants, the fertilizer only seemed to burn the leaves and scorch the stems. The crops began to wither and die, their once green leaves turning a crispy brown. Lee's face fell as he gazed out at the devastation. He felt a wave of despair wash over him, and for the first time, he began to question his approach. Was he really doing the right thing? Was he truly working with nature, or was he just trying to control it? As the sun began to set, Lee slumped against the fence, his eyes fixed on the ruined crops. He felt a sense of defeat wash over him, and for the first time, He began to wonder if there was more to farming than just hard work and determination. Lee sat in silence, surrounded by the ruins of his crops. The sun had set, casting a warm orange glow over the devastated landscape. He felt a sense of defeat wash over him, but as he gazed out at the withered plants, he began to see things in a new light. He remembered the words of his ancestors who had tended the land for generations. They had always spoken of working with nature, of listening to the rhythms of the earth and the cycles of the seasons. Lee realized that he had forgotten this wisdom, that he had been trying to force the land to conform to his own desires rather than working in harmony with it. As he sat there, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the nearby trees. Lee felt a sense of peace wash over him, and he closed his eyes, allowing himself to breathe in the scent of the earth. He remembered the words of Lao Tzu, the ancient sage who had taught the importance of WuWei, or effortless action. Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished, Lee whispered to himself, quoting the sage's words. He opened his eyes and gazed out at the land. He saw the way the light danced across the hills, the way the shadows fell across the valleys. He saw the beauty of the natural world, and he realized that he had been trying to control it, to force it to conform to his own desires. Lee stood up, feeling a sense of determination wash over him. He knew that he needed to change his approach, to adopt a more gentle and patient way of farming. He began to walk through the fields, feeling the earth beneath his feet and listening to the rhythms of the land. As he walked, he noticed the way the plants grew in harmony with each other, the way the trees provided shade for the smaller plants. He saw the way the insects flitted from flower to flower, pollinating the crops and bringing life to the land. Lee felt a sense of wonder wash over him, and he realized that he had been blind to the beauty of the natural world. He saw that he was not the master of the land, but rather a steward, a caretaker of the earth. "I will work with you, not against you," Lee whispered to the land, feeling a sense of peace and harmony wash over him. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Lee knew that he had found a new perspective, a new way of farming that was in harmony with the natural world. He felt a sense of hope and renewal, and he knew that he would be able to bring life to the land. As the days passed, Lee's fields began to transform before his eyes. The crops that had once been weak and struggling now grew strong and healthy, their leaves a vibrant green and their stalks tall and proud. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers and the sound of birds singing in the trees. Lee's neighbors, who had once been skeptical of his new approach to farming, now marveled at the transformation of his fields. They would often stop by to visit, asking Lee for advice and seeking to learn from his example. Lee was happy to share his knowledge, and soon he became a model for sustainable and harmonious farming practices in the community. But Lee's newfound understanding of WuWei extended far beyond his fields. He began to apply the principles to his own life, finding a sense of balance and harmony that he had never known before. He learned to listen to his own rhythms, to trust in the natural flow of life, and to let go of his need to control every detail. One day, as Lee was working in his fields, a group of travelers passed by. They were tired and hungry, and Lee invited them to rest and eat with him. As they sat together, Lee realized that he had been living in a state of constant striving, always pushing himself to be more productive and efficient. But as he looked at the travelers, he saw the beauty of simplicity and the joy of effortless action. "You are a true master of WuWei," one of the travelers said as they prepared to leave. "You have found the secret to living in harmony with nature and with yourself." Lee smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude and humility. He knew that he still had much to learn, but he was grateful for the journey that had brought him to this place. As the travelers departed, Lee returned to his fields, feeling a sense of peace and contentment. He knew that he had found a new way of living, one that was in harmony with the natural world and with his own heart. WuWei is not just a way of farming, Lee said to himself as he worked in the fields. It is a way of life. It is a way of trusting in the natural flow of things and of finding balance and harmony in all that we do. As the harvest season approached, Lee's fields were a sight to behold. The crops that had grown strong and healthy under his care were now ripe and ready to be gathered in. Lee felt a sense of pride and accomplishment as he looked out over his fields, knowing that the bounty before him was the result of his newfound understanding of WuWei. As he began to harvest his crops, Lee couldn't help but reflect on the lessons he had learned along the way. He thought about the struggles he had faced, the mistakes he had made, and the growth he had experienced. He realized that his journey had been just as much about cultivating himself as it had been about cultivating his crops. The natural world has a way of teaching us if we only take the time to listen, Lee said to himself as he worked in the fields. It teaches us about the importance of patience, humility, and effortless action. It teaches us about the interconnectedness of all things and the delicate balance of the ecosystem. As Lee harvested his crops, he felt a sense of gratitude for the land and for the natural world. He knew that he had been given a great gift and that it was his responsibility to use that gift wisely. He felt a sense of commitment to living in accordance with the principles of WuWei and to sharing those principles with others. One day, as Lee was finishing up the harvest, a group of young farmers came to visit him. They were eager to learn from his example and to hear about his experiences with WuWei. Lee was happy to share his knowledge, and he spent the day teaching them about the importance of working with nature rather than against it. WuWei is not just a way of farming, Lee told the young farmers. It is a way of life. It is a way of trusting in the natural flow of things and of finding balance and harmony in all that we do. The young farmers listened intently, and they asked many questions. Lee could see the eagerness in their eyes, and he knew that they were ready to learn. He felt a sense of hope for the future, knowing that the principles of WuWei would live on through the next generation. As the young farmers departed, Lee returned to his fields, feeling a sense of peace and contentment. He knew that he had found a new way of living, one that was in harmony with the natural world and with his own heart. He knew that he would continue to grow and learn, but he was grateful for the journey that had brought him to this place. The harvest of wisdom is a lifelong journey, Lee said to himself as he looked out over his fields. It is a journey of growth, of learning, and of self-discovery, but it is also a journey of joy,